Welcome back to another dream diary. This happened while I was at work. I was about 15 minutes away from finishing my night shift at work when I heard a loud crash at one of the office windows. I got up to check it out. Someone had thrown a fairly large rock through one of the front windows. It felt especially odd because I was working in the industrial district at 11:30 at night, with no other businesses open. After seeing the damage, I returned to my desk, quickly called security to inform them, and decided to head home. As I was leaving the building, I started to freak myself out more and more, until I ended up running to my car. I got in and drove off. It wasn't until I was almost home and calming down that I realized I hadn't unlocked my car when I got in. It had been unlocked the whole time. Panicked, I quickly reached my hand to the back seat, checking for any lurking attackers, but found nothing. About 30 minutes later, I called a friend who said he was out drinking, so I decided to join him. I grabbed my bike and began riding over. I wasn't in a hurry, just cruising down the road under the moonlight, when I suddenly heard someone riding behind me. I straightened up and moved to the side of the road. He passed me slowly, and just as he came alongside me, he flashed a smile I can only describe as completely insane. Startled, I flinched as he rode past. That's when it hit me, he was riding my mom's bike. I raced home as fast as I could. When I got there, sure enough, her bike was gone, and one of my car's doors was open, the back left one. I had been driving, and there was no reason for that door to be open. About 5 years ago, I lived in a major U.S. city downtown. Being a night person, I often found myself awake and bored after my roommate, who was the opposite, went to sleep. To pass the time, I would go on long walks, using the quiet time to think. I spent 4 years doing this, walking alone at night, and never had a reason to feel scared. I used to joke with my roommate that even the city's drug dealers were polite. But everything changed in just a few minutes one evening. It was a Wednesday, between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a park patrolled by police, far from my apartment. It was a particularly quiet night, even for a weekday, with almost no traffic and barely anyone around. The park, as usual, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street to loop back home when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was an odd dance, something like a waltz, but he finished each move with a strange forward stride. You could say he was dance-walking, coming directly toward me. I assumed he was drunk and moved as close as I could to the road, leaving most of the sidewalk for him to pass by. As he got closer, I noticed how graceful his movements were. He was very tall, lanky, and wearing an old suit. He kept dancing toward me, and soon I could see his face. His eyes were wide and wild, his head tilted slightly upward, looking at the sky, and his mouth was stretched into a painfully wide, cartoonish smile. Between his eyes and his grin, I decided to cross the street before he got any closer. I glanced away to cross the empty street, and when I looked back, I froze. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the road, perfectly parallel to me, facing me but still gazing skyward. His smile remained. I was completely unnerved. I started walking again, keeping my eyes on him, but he didn't move. After putting about half a block between us, I looked forward for just a moment to check the empty street ahead. Still uneasy, I glanced back, and he was gone. A brief sense of relief washed over me, but then I spotted him. He had crossed the street and was now crouched slightly. I couldn't be sure because of the distance and shadows, but I was almost certain he was still facing me. I had only looked away for about 10 seconds, which meant he had moved fast. Shocked, I stood there for a moment, staring. Then he started moving again, taking exaggerated, tiptoed steps like a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. But he was moving very quickly. I wish I could say I ran or pulled out my pepper spray or phone, but I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, as the smiling man crept closer. He stopped again, about a car length away. Still smiling, still looking at the sky. Finally, I found my voice. What I wanted to say was, "What the F do you want?" in a strong, angry tone. But what came out was a whimper. What the foo? Whether humans can smell fear or not, they can certainly hear it, and I could hear it in my own voice. That only made me more scared. But he didn't respond, he just stood there, smiling. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly turned around and began walking away, just like that. Not wanting to turn my back on him, I watched as he moved farther and farther away, until he was almost out of sight. Then, I realized something. He wasn't walking away anymore, he had stopped dancing. To my horror, I saw his shape getting larger and larger. He was coming back toward me, this time running. So, I ran too. I ran until I reached a better lit street with some traffic. When I looked back, he was nowhere to be seen. For the rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see his terrifying smile again, but he was gone. Later I discovered from the police patrolling the park, the insane dancing man was released multiple times from jail for breaking into people's car and hiding in them. That sent chills down my spine. I lived in that city for 6 more months after that night, but I never went on another walk. There was something about his face that stayed with me. He didn't look drunk or high, he looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a terrifying thing to witness. Subscribe.